doing a podcast consistently?
There's no way I do anything consistently, man.
Okay, so you're like me.
Yeah, I'll do it here and there, but there's no way you can get consistency out of
I was
this.
gonna say because it would be a good opportunity for you to practice.
No, yeah, absolutely. That's why I hopped on with Waldman a couple weeks ago. He's like, it was short notice, but he's like, "You want to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I need to practice. Get the reps in."
Exactly. That's all it is, dude.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just practicing fucking talking. So yeah, I'm gonna let you lead then.
Oh, all right, sweet.
Let you lead.
All right, sweet. So
dance with me.
All right, let's see how this goes, man. Man, I got to come up with an intro and everything. All right, give me 1 sec. All right, guys. Welcome to this new podcast that I'm launching just for fun. I am here with my co-host, Eric Stoner, a.k.a. Bo Jackson. Thanks for joining me today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude. I'm glad we're actually kind of getting this thing off the ground and kicking it around a little bit.
Yeah, it's like 3 months in the making.
So. Yeah, exactly.
To get one episode up. So yeah, let's just see how this goes, man. And I know we just wanted to talk about a couple things that we've been texting about back and forth. And a lot of people have been talking recently about analytics and what's good and what's bad. And I just wanted to talk about the samples in these types of games, right? So I talked about this on Waldman's podcast, but you have 60 plays in a game, 68 if you're lucky. That's on the high end.
Right.
And a lot of those plays can be manipulated by one team or another to make you practice something that they're never going to show again, or fuck, this sucks, man.
Well, okay, so I'll take your thought and kind of extrapolate it out. Well, Tony Romo talked about that in the one. I think it was, what was it, like the opening week, or it was when he was talking about the Patriots. In a situation of the game where it was completely out of hand, Belichick mixing in blitz looks that he doesn't really use to just kind of throw the charting off. And that's the kind of example that everybody goes to in terms of how you can mess with the sample size of plays. But you got to kind of understand that every game and every week is kind of its own individual thing. So just to give an example, like with the Rams, okay, so once Cooper Kupp goes down, and then Todd Gurley, basically after the Chiefs game, you could tell that he was never really right after that, and they started giving the load to C.J. Anderson a little bit. What they did offensively changed pretty significantly. So how much of all the first 8 weeks of the season of the Rams offense is really usable, as you're game planning for them in the playoffs?
Yeah, that's a good point, man. And two, when a player goes down like that, and you're trying out different personnel packages, and then they have to prepare for something else that they haven't seen, even though it may be like a lesser version of that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so and another example, an in-game example maybe, and this is kind of related to like what what Tony Romo was relating to with Belichick, but what defensive guys will do a lot of the time, because of the way that teams chart, down in distance. So you'll have 1st and 10, 1st in possession, which is, if you're a good team and you chart correctly, you will want to differentiate between 1st in possession and 1st and 10, because how a team acts on the first down of the possession is often wildly different from a first down later in the drive. And what you're trying to account for there is sudden change plays. Anytime the offense gets they get the ball like right after a turnover, or a big return or something like that. Something where like a momentum swinging play where field position changes and everything. They're probably usually going to be on the more aggressive side. That's why you always hear announcers say like watch for the shot play after a turnover. So you want to differentiate between those different types of situations. So on third down, you'll have third and short, which is like third and 1 to 3, third and medium, which is 4 to 6 or 4 to 7 yards, however you want to do it. And then third and long is usually just third and 7 plus. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people are like, once it's 7 plus, it's going to be a difficult situation for the offense. However, what you can do as a clever defensive coordinator is, intuitively that there's still a pretty major difference between like third and 7 and third and 15. So, and when you're in those third and like unmanageably long situations, you can kind of throw whatever the hell you want out there, and as long as you don't have a bust, you're gonna get to fourth down and you're gonna get the ball back. So you can really like mix up what your third and 7 plus, your third and long packages, and that's why you see so much crazy stuff on third and long in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. There's what you were going back to is just the sample size of the sport and the way that down and distance is charted in general. There's a lot of games that you can play, because this is something that I always go back to. The goal of the sport is not to gain the most yards on each play. Yeah. It is not to be the most efficient offense. It's really not even to put the most points up on the board, although that can be a good strategy. The goal really is to win the week that's right in front of you while showing as little as possible to the team that you got next.
Mm-hmm.
So the subterfuge, I mean, not showing your whole offense when you don't need to is a big part of it. You don't. Okay, so if you score 50 points against the Lions in October, you don't get to. It's not running credit. You know what I mean? You don't get to bankroll those points and carry them forward.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happened to the Rams against the Lions.
Yeah, their situation in general is just kind of interesting, because I don't think enough was paid attention to how much the structure of the offense was broken and changed once those two guys went down, because nobody really noticed, because the yardage totals still kind of looked the same. And C.J. Anderson was still as productive on the ground, or more productive than Todd Gurley, which is some stuff I kind of want to ask you about as we go into this. So even though the ground game and the total output looked just as good as it did in the first 8 weeks of the season, there were packages that they had early in the year that they were building on every single week that just went away. You know what I mean? Like the empty touch pass that everybody was going nuts for over the first 4 weeks of the season, that just went away. Todd Gurley couldn't run that anymore. And with that, they were building 2 to 3 new plays off of that every single week of the first month of the season. It was really cool to watch. It just went away.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have Gurley anymore, and I mean, you can do the analytics or whatever, but like you said, in the playbook type, like you just take away 40% of your playbook.
Yeah, well, and so much of that offense it's very, very related. Like, even though it's a one-back zone blocking offense that's run out of 11 personnel, philosophically, what they want to do is not that different from like what a wing T team does. And like a wing T, the wing T is like, it's a 3-back offense with gap blocking and pulling. So I know it doesn't seem like an obvious connection, but even though the Rams are 11 personnel and a one-back offense, and they have West Coast verbiage, the actual structure of what they do is more series type philosophy. So like in the wing T, you have it's called series type play calling. Or series type. The structure is based around series. So you'll have the trap series, which has the inside trap, the sweep, and the quarterback boot, and you can run any single one of those plays, and it looks exactly the same. You're just calling who's going to get the ball. It's the exact same flow of the backfield and everything. I mean, and that's basically what they're doing with the outside zone and the jet motion and the fly sweep coming off of that going the opposite direction. It's the exact same thing as the inside trap with the sweep off of it. And then they add in the boot to it too. Then you have it's a lot of east-west stretching at the line of scrimmage, and then you have to throw it on top of that. You have what really ties it all together is the boot, where you can throw to the guy running jet motion, or the screen back to the other side of the field to Gurley after he carries out his play fake. So it's a lot of slow developing stuff too. I mean, and basically once Gurley went down, all of that east-west misdirection, like they still ran the jet sweep a couple times a game to keep teams honest and stuff like that, but it was a lot more inside zone instead of outside zone. And once the running back pass game went away, I mean, C.J. Anderson, he was as productive on the ground, but so much of their playbook went away after that.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up like the series play calling stuff, because even on their play action stuff, they have the crossers like everybody else does. The Yankee stuff where one underneath crosser and one over the top crosser, but they also will have that over the top crosser run a post corner off that, depending on what the defender does. So yeah, I mean, it is series play calling. I mean, he's brought that to the NFL, which is funny that it's so effective, even from high school to the NFL. And two, yeah, I think you could probably pull up the numbers, and like you said, they are as productive in the passing game, but they probably aren't as explosive. I mean, they were running duo. I think Todd Gurley ran duo 52 times, and with C.J. Anderson, who played 2 games in the regular season, they ran it 21 times.
Yeah.
And the philosophy behind duo and wide zone don't mesh together on your play action drop back game. And their drop back passing game, I don't really trust it with Goff very much. And it was kind of stagnant, especially near the end of the year. So like you said, I don't think it was, if you pull from those weeks, and I know they were lesser opponents or whatever, and then once you get to the playoffs, the game kind of changes a little bit. But I bet even if you pull the numbers, that they weren't as productive in the passing game.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, like I said, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I mean, you charted basically their entire offense, and I covered them for their skill position guys for football guys this year every week. So I saw them every week, and to the eye test, there was a significant difference over the second half of the season. What's interesting is that they're an interesting offense in terms of design, and they're they light up the scoreboard, but they're kind of interesting to watch week to week because they don't really do that many different things. That's actually one of the things that I like about, like, okay, so writing up for their skill guys in terms of fantasy production for like fantasy guys was very, very boring because the statistical output every week was basically the same. I mean, I've never really seen anything like it where it's like Brandon Cooks is going to get 6 to 8 catches, 80 to 120 yards. He's probably not going to score a touchdown, and he's going to draw a PI. Like, I probably wrote that in like 14 out of the 16 weeks for him. Robert Woods, same type of thing. Like, they are going to run digs and deep overs to him. That's what he does. They'll run a couple of end arounds to him to keep the defense honest. And the statistical production every week is going to be the same. Tyler Higbee he's an offensive tackle, straight up. And that kind of relates back to the wing. I mean, that's not so much wing T's as single wing, which is like an overloaded offensive line, and the quarterback is a direct snap runner. But still kind of in the same family where he's not a pass threat. He is an offensive tackle. Cooper Kupp is the tight end in that. He's the tight end / like wing back. If you're looking at it from an NFL perspective, like he's the tight end in that offense. If you're looking at it from like the wing T perspective, he's the wing back. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, so you said, they ran the same shit all year, and I know you wrote about this too, but like, I mean, that was their demise in the playoffs, that he had the audacity basically to run the same thing he's run all year against Bill Belichick, who's been coaching probably, as long as McVay's been alive, and he just didn't have answers in that game.
Well, it's really interesting because that game was not entertaining from a fan perspective, but in terms of like, if you want to get like real pretentious and like football nerdy from like a historic, yeah. Like in terms of like football history nerdy stuff, it was very, very interesting because what New England did, basically nobody really runs like a true, so if you're going to play against the Rams offense and you want to run like a true old school Jimmy Johnson 4-3, you're going to have problems because of the surface area of how many gaps he presents compressed at the line of scrimmage with those slots and wing, like basically all those wing players. So the layering of your defense it's just, you're going to have bad angles. You're not going to be able to get into the crease properly between the wing and the tight end. It presents, you basically have to drop a safety down to deal with the number of gaps if you're going to play that specific style of defense. So the Rams, just the structure of their offense did or does to NFL defenses in particular is it gets them into very predictable looks because you can't really get exotic against them, and teams are freaked out against all the gaps and the moving gaps with motion. So what Belichick did is he was just we're going to throw the modern NFL defense out, and he ran like the Tom Landry 1970s 4-3 flex, which is basically covering up the guards and the tackles with 4 defensive linemen. Your outside backers are on the line of scrimmage, and they're your force players versus the run, and they're going to drop back in the curl flat against pass. Your Mike is basically just got to read and beat the center, and you basically have built a wall along the line of scrimmage. Nobody can get to the Mike backer because all he's got to do is beat the center. And then what those edge guys do, I think if McVay would have more consistently gone to the end arounds, it would have been there. But the structure of the defense kind of intimidated them out of it. And what New England did early in the game, like the first few plays, is against that fly motion, they hit those guys hard. Like Josh Reynolds got decleated on like the first play. It was like the first or second play of the game. He got jacked up on that fly motion, and they were just scared to go back. So basically that went out of their offense, and it was basically just so New England has built a wall along the line of scrimmage. One of those guys it's Patrick Chung, and he's a strong safety. So he's a guy that can kind of play as a linebacker and play coverage as well. Dante Hightower, we can't block him. What is the answer to that? You have to run quick passing. And the only quick passing the Rams do is out of gun. And when the Rams went to gun, New England changed up what they did. Mm-hmm. So, really the only answer for them would have been in that 2 weeks, was to completely revamp their quick game from under center, which they didn't do at all this year. And that kind of gets into the philosophical question of like, when people ask, and especially like football writers ask, is like, why doesn't this team do this more? It would obviously work. Look at the success rate of when they did this. And it's this tiny, tiny little sample size. And you have to look at it as like, dude, time is a finite resource to these guys. You can only get good at so many things.
Well, and when you take stats like that, it's like if the defense gives that to you. If the defense doesn't give it to you, then that stat doesn't exist, right?
Exactly.
And two, you were talking about the 5-0 or the Tom Landry flex. A lot of teams, they do go to their standard, 4-3, 3-4, 1 gap. And along the line, it always left a bubble, whether it was, a strong side B gap bubble, weak side B. And they attack the bubbles the whole time. And when there is no bubble, well, there's nowhere to attack in the run game. And so I thought that was interesting too, that he just took away, like you said, he built a wall at the line of scrimmage, and there's nothing they could do. And unless they committed to the end around stuff, but they were obviously, afraid.
They got intimidated out of it, straight up.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna, stick with the wing tee, I mean, you got to go all out, man. Like that's what the play
guy's
is
got to
calling
touch
for.
the ball. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Cool. All right, so I think we pretty much nailed that one. And then I did want to talk about like red zone shit. So, I was looking at some numbers and Justice actually pointed this out to me, but like from the 9-yard line and in, over 51% of touchdowns are scored. Right. And I think this is where running becomes valuable again, especially from, the 1, 2, and 3-yard line. And it's something we don't really talk. Everybody does film breakdowns and breaks down passing plays, but nobody really does like a red zone study of what teams are doing down there and why passing isn't effective. And I know I asked you this before, but why is passing not effective in the red zone?
I mean, just look at it intuitively is that the defense doesn't have to worry about getting beat over the top, so they can sit on everything. The space is compressed. Everything happens faster. And like you can just sit on certain areas of the field. The defense, like, look at it like, okay, so I think it was Tom Harriman when he was still at Ohio State kind of broke it down like this. When you're inside the red zone, to consistently score in the red zone, you basically have to do one of three things. You have to have a highly, highly precise, precision, quick pass game. That's your one option. Your second option is your quarterback needs to be able to be a direct runner, and you need to be able to tilt the math and make it, 11 on 11 again. Or third, you need to be able to run. It's kind of related to the second one. You need to be able to run option if you're gonna run from shotgun. I mean, if you're just trying to run shotgun runs inside the red zone, where your offensive line is not going to be able to get any get off. The timing of the play is much slower. The runner can't get downhill. It's just you're moving the ball backwards to go forwards. Does that make sense? That's something that always kind of bugs the hell out of me about shotgun. If you're not running option or direct like a quarterback run, like you're hiking the ball 4 yards backwards to go a few yards forward. It makes no sense.
Well, everything everything hits slower out of the gun, which is why flexbone teams run under center because it hits faster. The timing aspect matters. You have so much more time to read it as a backer or a safety from the gun than you do from under center.
Yeah, well, and then the other thing is that in terms of play calling too for the defense, in the red zone, especially inside the 5, it becomes very tech mobile, where you're basically selling out runner pass, and if your guys can't get into a 3-point stance and surge off the line of scrimmage and get a couple of yards, like you have major problems. Well, you have major problems as an offense because the space is so constricted in the passing game. Unless you throw it short to the flats or high into the back of the end zone, there's not a lot of room to do anything.
Yeah, I love the red zone because I think this is where you can scheme your guys open between the 20s all day. Like you can run Mills versus cover 4 or whatever. You could be the best play caller in the world. But when it comes down to the red zone, I mean, it's talent versus talent basically at that point, right? I mean, should Seattle have run or passed it? I mean,
well, that's the ultimate chicken or the egg question, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a right answer though.
I think so too. So to just kind of tease this thought experiment out, and even though it's been done 100,000 times before, the evidence is on the side of the people that say they should have thrown, because if you look at it in terms of like personnel, and how people explain it on that side is that New England stayed in their heavy personnel So why run it when you don't have the numbers advantage? And the kind of just the response to that is you only needed to get a yard, dude. You only needed to get 1 yard. And you had 2 plays to do it.
And you have a backfield that consisted of probably 2 of the most talented players at positions at that point in their careers. So you have the most physical runner probably we've seen in this era back there. I just don't. I don't know why that.
1 yard. 1 yard. And and not only that, I mean, I know that you and I have talked about this, but if you've read Michael Lombardi's newest book or listened to the audiobook, however you want to do it, he talks.
Don't listen to the audiobook.
Yeah, it's him reading it, and I love him. I actually love Lombardi on podcasts and everything, but his flow and cadence as a reader is just not very it's not very natural. I mean, I wouldn't be good at reading an audiobook either. So, and nobody wants to listen to me talk that much. So, I mean, it's kind of the pot calling the kettle black, but he talks specifically about how New England had prepared for that specific situation, like the spring before that season had even started, and they had specifically designed a red zone package that they didn't use all year, which was a heavy goal line package, but with 3 defensive backs. So they could match 11 personnel from short yardage in the red zone. And they were prepared for it. And you know what? They baited it straight up. And honestly, if Seattle would have just run a sneak or something to Marshawn Lynch or option or a quarterback designer, you had, like you said, you had 2 of the most like dynamic physical runners of this era, especially as a tandem between quarterback and running back. You know what I mean? Like, you should have been able to get a yard on the ground, man. And you had 2 chances to do it. Don't throw from the 1.
Well, and 2, I love watching Washington State, but I mean, they, especially against teams with equal or more, it's tough down there. I mean, there was one series where threw a fade 4 in a row from the 1 yard line. And you could say, you know, all you want about, but that's just like poor. That's understanding that you're worse at the line of scrimmage, but that's a tough way to score 6 points, man. It's tough.
I mean, it's the proverbial long 2 in basketball, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to do something that's so high effort. I mean, the reward is a touchdown. Don't get me wrong, but the percentage, I mean, just a lot of things can go wrong when you throw in short yardage, dude. And in a compressed area like that. I know people don't want to hear that, but sometimes you really only need to gain a few yards. It's not the end of the world.
No, it's not. All right, man. And then and so there's been a lot of debate recently about pressure versus coverage, right? Which one is more valuable? Which one is more sustainable? How you should set up your team? And I guess I wanted to hear your thoughts on this. I have a feeling I know what it is, but give me your reasoning on what you think is more valuable if they're connected and you can't really separate them, or what you think.
Okay, so they are connected and you can't really separate them. I guess the question is this: Deion Sanders basically swung 2 Super Bowls by himself, going from Atlanta, going to San Francisco. They won a Super Bowl, and he was a difference maker, and then going to Dallas, where they won a Super Bowl, he was the difference maker. And those 2 teams played in the playoffs in both of those years. There's the question of, let's take Revis as another example. what's more valuable if you can use one player to essentially shut down one side of the field and do whatever you want in the front seven, is that more valuable than being able to get consistent pressure with, average players on the back end? Okay. Let me ask you this: Do you think that the Giants that won the second Super Bowl against the Patriots, was that a great team or a great defense?
I mean, that was a great defense.
Okay, I actually agree. Now let's go even further back to the first one, the one that won the first Super Bowl. Because I think that the Giants team that won the second Super Bowl, that defense was significantly better, even though we kind of remember the first Giants team more. How do you feel about that specific Giants defense, the 07 one?
07, was Strahan? Was that like one of his last years?
That was his final year. Final year. So they had Strahan, they had young Justin Tuck, they had young O.C. Humaniora.
Okay, yeah.
At linebacker, they had Antonio Pierce, who was pretty damn good. Like, easily a top 10 inside backer in the league at that time, probably like a top 7 type guy. No other linebackers of note. Their best defensive back was probably Corey Webster from LSU. I don't know if you remember him or not.
Yeah.
Like, he was probably their best defensive back, and he had developed into a nice player at that point, but he's like the definition of like replacement level cornerback.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to kill you, but he's not somebody that you're ever going to like pay or depend on as a cornerstone of your defense.
I mean, yeah, he's kind of like Robert Alford, or these.
I don't even know if I would say that he was as good as like Robert Alford has been at his peak in Atlanta. Like, the first few years of Corey Webster was rough. Like I said, by the Super Bowl year, he had kind of developed into a nice player at that point. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment because, like, I think those two teams were kind of living in the same world to the 07 Giants versus like the Revis Jets, which was like right after. I mean, because I always thought it was interesting what Rex Ryan did, where basically like, I mean, his Ravens. I still think that his 06 Ravens defense is like the best defense I've ever seen. They're kind of like forgotten in time, so to speak, because they were one of those teams that just they couldn't close out and win the Super Bowl, so they're just not going to be remembered. I don't even think they made it to the AFC Championship game. They lost in like the divisional round, like 12-6 or something, or 12-9 to the Colts that year. But yeah,
they had a crazy amount of like defensive touchdowns that year too.
It's the best defense, like, since I've been an adult and I've really been watching football. That's the best defense I've ever seen. And I know that like the numbers don't necessarily bear it out. I think like the Bucs defense is the best ever in terms of DVOA. What Seattle, honestly, like what Seattle did in a passing era, like their passing numbers in a passing era is pretty crazy, and we're gonna look back on that like, dude, that was pretty fucking nuts.
Like, but okay, let me ask you this: was Seattle's dominance during this period due to their coverage or their ability to generate pressure?
The first 3 years or so, it was 100% based on coverage, because all they had was Chris Clemens.
Okay, that's fair.
That was it. That's all they had in the front. Like they were playing Red Bryant as like a heavy defensive end, and like when teams would go hurry up, he'd be stuck on the field at defensive end for them. Well,
he was the first guy. I remember them saying, this is when I first get into football, and they're like, he's a 5 tech and 2 gaps off the, as a 5 tech, and now that's popularized now, like Alabama and stuff, for quarters to gain back a gap, to take players out of conflict or whatever. And I mean, they were doing that in like what, 2012?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Pete was kind of already starting to experiment with it a little bit at the end of USC, and I remember there was like a post game interview his last year at USC when Oregon just fucking torched them on the ground, like destroyed them on the ground. And he said in his post game interview, he's like, "Hey, we try to do some different things. I don't think I'll ever do it again." And he was starting to play with that 2-gap, 1-gap stuff. And I mean, he wasn't the first guy to do it in the NFL, of course, but like he kind of popularized it.
Definitely.
Yeah, it definitely got popularized under him for whatever reason, you know. But yeah, I mean, now it's pretty much standard. Any team that runs an even front, usually they're going to have in their base package, they're probably going to have at least one guy 2-gapping up front.
Yeah, and when we talk about this, I guess this is personal opinion and whatever, but defense is naturally reactionary, and anytime that the defense can be proactive, I'm a fan of. And there's a ton of ways to do that, but I think pressure is the easiest way to do that. And you can do that in multiple ways. Like you could go and stockpile, pass rushers, or you can do all this simulated pressure stuff, or, like just get accumulation of talent or whatever. But in my heart, I think I don't care like what the numbers say, or when I watch, I want, because we don't talk about like football players just being humans enough. Like you could have a bad game because you didn't sleep well, or like you lost a bet or whatever, or something's in your mind. And I think mentality is huge, especially football players. I mean, it's modern day gladiators. So I want players, dictating what they're doing. I don't want to have reaction, and coverage is naturally reactionary. It doesn't have to be, but that's why I always lean towards pressure, like in these types of debates, because I mean, we're humans, and being reactionary all the time, it's almost passive. So, and if I want a good defense, I'm not going to have a passive defense, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, kind of the other thing is and this is kind of specific from player to player, in terms of like in terms of your team building philosophy, is that if you're going to allocate a lot of money to one or the other, it's usually wiser to do it up front. And the reason why is because, and this is especially true at corner, not so much at safety, is when a corner loses it and he becomes a marked man, like it becomes known. You know what I mean? It becomes known, and teams attack it consistently, and they'll attack that guy until he proves that he can stop it. And it's kind of hard to put your finger on. You can't really know it unless you're somebody that like follows your team or a certain team week to week, and you really kind of see that variation in the ebbs and the flows. And when it happens to a corner, like, dude, it happens so fast where it's like, dude, I don't know what the hell just happened, but this guy is an absolute liability on the field right now. Okay, so it happened to the Jaguars last year with AJ Boye. And I mean, you can kind of see like the shadows of it starting in the AFC Championship game the year before, when Brandon Cooks just kind of tore him up off of deep stops. You know what I mean? Just open him up on the 9 route, and as soon as he turns his hips, just just convert it to a stop and hit it. And I mean, basically from the AFC Championship game last year, or I mean 2 years ago, dude was a marked man all last year pretty much. And I don't know like what the PFF numbers say against him, or what the passer rating was against him, and this coverage or that coverage or whatever. All I could tell is that teams were attacking him and being successful doing it.
Yeah, and I think that was one thing Peyton was really good at was just like when he saw weakness in a corner.
Dude.
I mean, he was just going to go after that corner all game, regardless of where he was or until you benched him. Like he was just going to go after him.
Guarantee when Peyton Manning's playing, if your corner has an injury and you got to throw a cold backup onto the field, that dude is getting thrown at on that play. He's getting thrown at on the next play, probably the next 2 plays. Like dude, playing corner is tough, dude. It's like playing offensive tackle. You're out on the perimeter against a guy probably who's bigger, or not bigger than you, but more athletic than you, and you're reacting to him. It's a tough gig.
Well,
it's a tough gig.
And I asked like why coverage was so volatile, and PFF Mike, I mean, he put it into like terms that I can understand, which I appreciate. But like, I mean, everybody notices when you get beat, right? Like, It's just like tackle. Like
it's visceral, yeah.
You stop a guy for 4 yards and nobody cares, and you could have made like a great play, and nobody's gonna give you any props or any. It's a tough job, and it happened with Xavier Rhodes this past year too. I mean, like the Vikings pass D in 17 was just insane, and Rhodes he must have been injured or I don't know what, but he was only 80% of what he was in 17. He was getting torched some games.
Yeah, dude. When a corner drops, when you have that drop off from like 100% to 90, 85, 80%, it's significant. It's not like an edge rusher where it's like, okay, his output dropped from like 10 sacks a year to 8 sacks a year. He can still be a productive player for us. You know what I mean? A corner at 80% is giving up visceral big plays.
I think it puts into perspective like how fucking great Revis was. Like, I don't think we appreciate what he did enough. But
I've kind of had that talk in just group chats or text messages to different people. Like, if you redo that draft, let me pull it up. What was it? That was the 2007 draft, right? 2007 NFL draft. I'm almost positive.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2007. This is one of the. It's one of the all-time great drafts. That's why I have this question. Okay, so you have Jamarcus Russell, one of the worst busts of all time, going first overall, and then after that, this is just in the first round. We're not going to go in sequential order because there's some busts in here in between. You have Calvin Johnson, borderline Hall of Famer. Joe Thomas, who will be in the Hall of Fame. LaRon Landry, who made an All-Pro team, who made some All-Pro teams, had a nice career. Adrian Peterson, Hall of Famer. Patrick Willis, bubble most likely in Hall of Famer. Marshawn Lynch, bubble almost in Hall of Famer. Darrelle Revis, absolute lock Hall of Famer. Dude, if you redo that draft,
I mean, Joe Staley was like 28. Like
Eric Weddle, 37. Lamar Woodley, second round. It's a load. I mean, like a guy like Ted Ginn went 9th overall in that draft and is like, he's one of those guys where it's so interesting because just like what the perception of him was at whatever point it was in his career kind of like tainted our outlook on him so much. If that dude's not like a Heisman Trophy finalist, and if he doesn't get picked, 9th overall in the draft, if he's like the 28th pick, you know what I mean? People say like, dude, that guy had a hell of a career. Even with the drop problems, how old is he now? He's got to be like 35 or something, right?
At least. Yeah, no, like he came in with such high expectations in Miami. I mean, he wasn't set up to succeed at all, but like you look at his production and I mean, I would take that. That's a good NFL every day. Yeah, like screw the drops. Like,
okay, so here, like, would you rather have Dwayne Bowe, who Kansas City took later in the first round, and his peak, which was better, I think, than any peak that you would have gotten out of Ted Ginn, or would you rather have Ted Ginn in that career?
I mean, Ted Ginn has that special team stuff, though.
He does. And just what he does is kind of not, it's rare.
No, yeah, absolutely.
His X factor is rare. That's why he's hung around so long, even with the flaws. Okay, so to get back to the original question though, so let's the best players in this draft: Calvin Johnson, Joe Thomas, Adrian Peterson, Patrick Willis, Marshawn Lynch, Darrelle Revis. We'll throw Joe Staley in there too. If you do a redraft, I'm pretty sure that Revis goes first in that draft. I'm almost 100% certain.
Yeah, I mean, he made the biggest difference by far. Well, not by far. Too. I mean, yeah, I mean,
he made the most money.
I'm not a slight to Calvin, but it's a little bit easier to replicate wide receiver production than it is corner production.
I mean, dude, Calvin was a special player, but to extrapolate onto that point, the prejudice that people have against running backs, I honestly feel the same way about wide receivers. 90% of these dudes, their production is replaceable. There's 4 or 5 guys that really, really matter that you have to absolutely game plan for, and that are, relatively complete. There's really no such thing as a complete receiver in the in the most idealistic sense of the word. But 90% of wide receivers are it's replaceable. It's drag and drop. It's no different than running back.
Well, I'm a Vikings fan or whatever. I mean, you can replace Adam Thielen with I don't know, Anthony Miller from the Bears, and you could get his production minus 2 touchdowns. Easier to scheme up hot dudes or some, manipulate the personnel so they're going against some other team. You can't do that on defense. You're one-on-one.
Absolutely, yeah. Defense is just different, man. It's a different animal. It's a different animal. It's the same sport, but it sounds so obvious to say, but just the mentality you have to be a defensive player, or to be just a defensive-minded football person, or to think about the game in that kind of structure, is just so it's very, very different from offense. I know that intuitively and common sense wise it's no shit, but it is very, very, very different.
Absolutely. So I got a question for you though. So you have between Adrian Peterson and Patrick Willis,
okay,
career-wise, in this redraft, who are you taking?
Okay, so Patrick Willis. The problem is Patrick Willis's feet got fucked up so early in his career that we really only got peak Patrick Willis for a year or two.
Dude, pulled up
by the time the 49ers were good, Bowman was already better. That's the thing that kind of gets forgotten. He had a 9-year career where 4 years of it was dude, this guy could be the best linebacker of all time, and then it was after that he was still dude, he was still a great linebacker after that, but it wasn't quite the same, and he wasn't even really the best linebacker on his own team after that.
So I'll agree, but I pulled up old Game Pass of the 49ers, and Sproles was still on the Saints. I just wanted to see what Willis was doing. And the Saints were throwing weak side option, right? So it's Bowman one-on-one with Sproles. And
yeah.
Even at the end of his career, dude, he was
you mean Willis?
A 2-yard. Yeah, Willis, sorry. No. Even at the end of his career, dude, it was only a 2-yard gain, and Sproles was probably in his prime by then.
Yeah.
So
it's unfair because I'm holding the kind of otherworldly peak that he had. I'm prejudiced against what even as good as he wasn't what he was.
He could have been better, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't quite have the career that he could have had, and it was such a short career too. Dude, Adrian, it's a good question because dude, Adrian Peterson is special, man. Adrian Peterson's. It's unfortunate that he plays in the era that he does not appreciate running talents, or just having offenses built around a running game quite as much as it used to. Because I mean, if you line that guy up in a 2-back offense, dude, he can carry an offense. He can carry it. In what I'm kind of like I'm saying a 2-back offense, he can absolutely run 1-back stuff. He can run zone up there with the best of them.
But he thrives when there's 8 defenders in the box.
Like, yes, exactly.
You want him one-on-one with anybody. Like, you really do. You kind of want the unblocked dude. You want him running those ISOs versus the backer, because he can run him over or break him down in the hole, and it's 80. You know.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like the counterintuitive thing about running against a plus box. Like, everybody says, don't ever run against when the defense has plus numbers in the box, whether it's an 8-man box versus 2-back or 12 personnel, or if it's a 7-man box against 11. If you're -1, you should never just be handing the ball off to your running back, and that's not necessarily true, because it actually becomes very, very similar to the pass game, where it becomes high variance running. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I mean, watching Adrian Peterson for 10 years. No, absolutely, it makes
so when you have sense. Yeah, so when you have a plus in the box, like I said, it becomes very, very, very high variance. So usually you're either going to get stuffed, or if the back is a great back against +1. And he can make the unblocked man miss, you're going to pop big plays because you don't have 2 alley defenders. One of those safeties is down in the box getting dusted, either at the line of scrimmage or 4 yards off the line of scrimmage. The next guy that can touch Adrian Peterson is the deep third safety and the corner playing pursuit from the other side of the field that's going to chase him down to like maybe the 10-yard line if he can catch him. Yeah. And that's what can happen when you run against a plus box. I mean, people hate it because, like I said, it doesn't make sense, because it's like, why are you trying to do this thing that's hard to do, that the defense is specifically trying to take away? And the reason why is because we can still block it, number one, especially if we get the angles right. If you get the angles right, you can block against a plus defense. I mean, all of the 2-back stuff, I love I-formation football because I know it very, very well. I played in it, I've coached it. Like, I know what you would consider like the Norv Turner offense. I don't know his verbiage, but that style of offense, like, I know like the back of my hand. You can run against a plus box versus that, even in the NFL. I mean, Norv Turner did it for a long time. And it all comes down to the angles and what kind of fronts you're getting and how you adjust the angles of your blocking and where the double teams are coming off and who you're going to leave unblocked on the backside, et cetera, et cetera. And you can run against that stuff. And like I said, it becomes high variance where you start popping really, really big plays. And then not only that, I mean, if you can run the ball against a defense that's trying to stop it, you will demoralize that defense. It's an emotional thing. It 100%, unless you've been in that situation and either coaching or playing or whatever, you can feel it. Even just watching a game, you can feel it as it's happening when a team is imposing its will and physically taking over a game. I mean, it's what New England did the whole playoffs, basically.
I mean, even defensively, I mean, their cornerbacks were grabbing the shit out of wide receivers. And the playoffs are a different game. We're not going to call that.
It's officiated different.
Yeah, and
it's not the same sport. Trying to compare like NFL playoff football versus NFL regular season football is almost like trying to compare NFL playoff or NFL football to college football or college football to high school football. Not in terms of the talent disparity, but in terms of like it is a completely different game in terms of both the pace and like how it's called by the officials and how the officials manage the game. It's very, very, very different. It's more physical. Everybody is trying harder. The officials are not really they're not gonna bail you out for bad plays.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be blatant. Yeah,
it's got to be blatant. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, and that's where coaching comes down to. Like Belichick, I mean, he's been there 20 years now. Like, he knows what's going to get called and what's not going to get called. And he's willing to risk, a couple holding penalties if it means your wide receiver is going to be blanketed the next 20 plays.
Well, it really is. I'd make so many comparisons between football and basketball because the sports are becoming so similar. Even though like basketball, I don't understand basketball on like a technical level like that. But I mean, in terms of like the game theory stuff, they're becoming very, very similar. It's no different than like overloading the strong side zone or not get like making the official call, like the 3-second rule against a big man, like staying in the paint. Like make him stay in the paint and push the line and make him call it on you every time, because he's not going to, because you know why? Because the official doesn't want to mess up the flow of the game either.
Yeah, I mean, they're scared.
They don't want. It's crazy for everybody to wrap their head around because there are so many penalties, but officials don't want to call a penalty on every play, especially like the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's human nature. I'm sorry. It just is. I mean, Pete was the exact same way with the Seahawks. I mean, that was his whole. I mean, he even carried it into the regular season. He's like, we'll get called for holding penalties. I don't give a shit. Like, we're going to be physical with the wide receivers. Make them call it.
Well, and I just wanted to talk about the plus box and running. Like we talk about, checking into the run based off numbers a lot. And I know, you gain a more consistent average, right? You get 5 yards of carry as opposed to 3. But I think it evens out in the end because you don't get those explosive plays as often, right? I mean, not many runs at a spread shotgun running, go 80. I mean, I don't have the numbers or whatever, but I'm willing to bet it's like less than 1%. Whereas if you line up in heavy, I mean, you're probably hitting it 5% of the time.
Well, not even that, but just there's okay. So what you're talking about is kind of like what Mike Leach talks about, where it's like I just call passing plays and we'll tag the run in if we get the right look for it.
Well, yeah, and that's a problem too, but.
Or like you said, just kind of calling it against what kind of defensive structure you get at the line of scrimmage, or like what McVay does, kind of holding off and seeing how the defense lines up, or making the play call from there. What you can have problems with that, especially if you're doing it based off box counts or reading the safety, is it doesn't take into account what can get screwed up with a late safety rotation, which is, I mean, NFL teams have late safety rotations anyways. That's kind of that's what makes the NFL different from lower levels, is that the safeties aren't giving away like, hey, we're in cover 4. You know what I mean? We're not 10 yards flat-footed reading the end man on the line of scrimmage or number 2. We're not going to just, some teams will. We're not going to just sit with a free safety 15 yards off the ball, and that's a look in that we're in, before you even break the huddle, and we're going to be in that after you snap the ball. It doesn't happen like that. You get way, way more late rotations. So that kind of cat and mouse, Tecmo Bowl kind of play calling, it's not quite as effective. And then like what you were talking about with in terms of box counts is that, I mean, once you get up into that higher level of defenses, fitting up versus the run is not really done on a gap basis anyways. It's done by flow and run fits, whether you have flow to or away. Basically, okay, so like, let's go back to what I was talking about earlier, like how when we started this conversation way in the beginning, if you want to run like a Jimmy Johnson 4-3 against the Rams with a layered, like your linebackers layered in the bubbles in between your front 4, but off the line of scrimmage. If you want to do that and you want to stay in a 2-high shell with 2 high safeties back and be -1 in the box and invite the defense to run against it, or invite the offense to run against it, you can still play the run pretty damn well out of that front just by asking your Mike to 2-gap and not run the Tampa 2 stuff where he has the deep drop. All you got to do really, if it's flow strong, you're gonna fit up strong side A. If it's flow weak, you're gonna fit up strong side B. Strong side backer, he's gonna gap exchange with the defensive end in front of him. Weak side linebacker, If it's flow away, he's going to become the cutback defender. If it's flow to him, he's going to have gap exchange. And you can mitigate that, and unless it's a super high level back that's going to be really, really patient and hit the bubble that appears post snap correctly, hit the bubble that appears post snap correctly, then I mean you can fit that stuff up versus the run.
Yeah, I mean when you count box numbers,
and that's just one defensive front with a minus in the box. That's not even getting into the crazy shit that teams do at the college. I mean, I know that you watch Iowa State a lot, and I haven't really watched them at all. But like you and Justice have sent me some things on their front, and it's like, dude, they stop the run with what, with 5?
I mean, you could do it with 4.
Yeah.
So against five blockers plus the back, I mean, you're -2 hypothetically. But I like how you said post snap, because when you count the men in the box, I mean, that's pre-snap, and you need to read then post snap, because like you said, Iowa State, I mean, they have their mic will play the front side, their nose plays the back side, but if it's zone, that mic will slow play the front side A, because he has a trigger player in this middle of the field safety coming too, so he's inserting into the box with the overhang, and then he can play from A to C, waiting for the cutback. So I mean, there's ways to manipulate the gaps and stuff, and I think that's one thing that these box numbers fail to mention. But if you're watching, that's something you could pick up on, and that's something you can use that against them.
Honestly, box numbers in general are just kind of bullshit. I mean, first of all, if you look at most studies or numbers or whatever that people throw out in terms of a box stat, it's usually just, is there 8 in the box or not? And that happens on 10, 15% of plays in an NFL game now?
Mm-hmm.
How often do you really get, do you really get a base personnel look in a game? 15?
I mean, the only people they're playing base against now are the Patriots.
The Patriots, yeah. I mean, so this idea that 11 personnel is great because it just pulls a defender out of the box, and you can't run an 8-man box against 11 personnel, guys. Ho ho. Well, I mean, all you got to do, it's the same answer. You just drop the safety, and you have 7 in the box against their 6 blockers, and you're still +1.
Well, it's funny too, because I mean, the lower levels dictate what the higher levels are doing now. So you have Derwin now, and you have Minka, and you have basically these cornerbacks that are linebackers too, because they're playing the star nickel position or whatever. And if you want to line up an 11, that's fine. But now the defense has that. That used to be your cornerback 3 or whatever. That used to be a bad player. But now, Saban and Venables and all these top tier programs are putting their best dude at nickel instead of corner or safety or whatever.
Really, who that really started with was Honey Badger at LSU. And I remember specifically because were you really watching back then? So this is probably 2011.
I think I was in boot camp or some shit back then. But...
Okay, so this is when Dana's first taken over as head coach at WVU, and LSU and West Virginia played each other. I want to say it was either 2010 or 2011. It was when Honey Badger was there. It was when Gino, Tavon, and Stedman were at West Virginia. It was that specific era. And
was it after Clemson or before Clemson? Because they put up 70 on Clemson. It must have been 11 then.
It was before Clemson.
Okay, yeah. So then
it was before Clemson. Yeah, because it was when Gino was still a junior. Gino was a junior, Stedman was a junior, and Tavon was still a sophomore. Honey Badger was a sophomore. Morris Claiborne was a sophomore, I think. Yeah, dude. Okay, so we're getting off topic, but yeah, because I remember specifically Dana saying this guy is a nickel, but in terms of our offense and how we're identifying him as a Sam linebacker.
I mean, that's all it is. It's an apex Sam linebacker.
He's an
That's all it
apex
is.
Sam linebacker. That's all it is. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
And you can call it anything you want, but I mean, the structure doesn't change. He's still, accountable for whatever gap or whatever hook curls. You can manipulate that many different ways. It's just structure. The structure changes because the offense decided to take one guy out of the box. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even think about it going, if you want to, okay, so I have Madden on PC, and I know that you are now a Madden PC gamer as well, is what I've heard. Is this correct?
Well, I got the game. I have
You haven't booted it up yet?
I haven't been able to even play a game yet, but
okay, so Madden on PC is awesome because number one, there's mods, so you can actually fix the game and make it fucking work right, especially if you want to play against the computer, and you don't have to go into slider hell. And number two, the roster editors and the roster editing community is very rich. So there's a guy on the Operation Sports forums who has a 2002 roster that's actually really, really legit. 2002. So this is the first year when the Texans are coming into the NFL. So it's our first year of 32 teams and the current division breakdown we have now. So it's a really, really interesting year to kind of, and you got to think too, like this is when Madden's hitting its heydays in 2002. That's the first year of Vic start. So this is the Marshall Faulk cover.
Oh,
so
shit.
yeah. So in Madden 2000, and so that would have been Madden 03, right? Michael Vick was not good in the game because he hadn't started yet. He was like one of those guys that's like a high potential guy, but Madden doesn't really know what the fuck to do with his ratings because he's never played, even though he's been in the NFL for a year. But in this roster, because we have the benefit of hindsight, it's like if you took that 2002 roster and edited it to kind of reflect how that season played out too. So you have like Michael Vick actually being really, really good. You have it's a really, really good put together roster. And the reason why I bring this topic up is because it was really interesting because as I was going through it, I had forgotten how many, like, dude, straight up 90, I think it was 90, over 90% of the teams in the NFL played like straight classic 4-3. Now there was different variations of the 4-3 that they played, whether it was like Tampa style or
like the Miami style or
Miami style with who was it? It's escaping me right now.
Jimmy Johnson?
No, because Jimmy Johnson style is really not that different from Tampa 2. Like honestly, like I kind of consider Jimmy Johnson in Tampa 2 and like even old like Steelers cover 2, like back in the 70s. That's all kind of like the same family. I'm talking more about like a very, very heavy 4-3 where like the Sam linebacker is the star of the defense. And you see a ton of it, like even because when you think back of like Chicago in the Urlacher era, you kind of only remember like them with Lovie Smith running that Tampa 2 style. But before Lovie got there, it's like a 4-3 with two 350-pound defensive tackles and no edge rushers.
Oh, was it like Pat Williams and
Yes.
Keith Williams? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Dude, like a lot of the defenses were structured like that. And I mean, even like guys that you would think of as traditional 3-4 guys, like Dick LeBeau was the head coach of Cincinnati at the time, and they were running like a zone blitz 4-3. Like how Dom Capers used to do in Jacksonville, which is like was a zone blitz fire zone, but they did it out of a 4-3 structure, and like Takeo Spikes is the best player on the defense, and they have no edge rushers. Really, it's just a very, very fucking strange time. I'm like, do you remember Julian Peterson at all?
Was he that backer that was like a little bit? I don't remember too much though.
Okay, so he was kind of like, if I could describe him, he is kind of like the ideal of what Jamie Collins would be like at a ridiculously high level. Like I remember one, like they had when Julian Peterson was at his peak, like they had a game where they had a bunch of corners that went down, and they were actually able to put him at outside corner and run cover 3 with him.
Oh,
And
shit.
and he was a Sam backer. And I mean that was there were and if you just kind of look through the roster of that time, like there were no good edge rushers. Very, very few. So this is also the rookie year of Dwight Freeney.
Well,
Julius Peppers is in his second year in this roster. And then there's Simeon Rice, Jason Taylor, and that's pretty much it.
What about Javon Curse?
Okay, so Javon Curse at this time was considered good, but he was broken down and injured at this point.
Okay.
Curse was never really as good as he was like his rookie year. He's one of those like where it was like, dude, when you see him his rookie year and he takes the league over by storm, and then his body just kind of consistently kept falling apart from there. It was really sad actually, because he was special. He started out as a DB, I think, at Florida. Him and Mike Peterson. There
was Simeon Rice too. And I think that was one of the reasons that Tampa team was so successful, is because the market, dictates scheme or whatever. And they just loaded up on 250-pound edges that nobody wanted. And they had pass rush that nobody else had.
Yeah, like it was a very, very, very bizarre time. The only 3-4 teams I think you had in that year specifically, you had Pittsburgh, of course, under Cowher. Dom, in his first year in Houston, he went back to the 3-4 after being the running a 4-3 in both Jacksonville and Carolina. I believe he ran 4-3, and then he got the head coaching job for the expansion Texans. Went back to 3-4, but was never really able to get good enough personnel and pull it off. Like they never had a fucking edge rusher, even though they were running 3-4. And then Wade, interestingly enough, like Wade in Atlanta was running a 3-4, the same one gap 3-4 he has always run, but it was probably the worst fit for him in his NFL career in terms of the scheme matching the talent. Like that was a team that straight up should have been a 4-3. Like Patrick Kearney's not J.J. Watt or Bruce Smith. You know what I mean? Like that dude should have just been a strong side and in a 4-3. Keith Brooking kind of got beat up as an inside backer in a 3-4. Like all those guys were stoked. As great as Wade was, like as great as Wade is, like they were stoked when he got out of there and they went to a 4-3 under Mora. And it fit them better. And then other than that, I'm trying to think if anybody else ran 3-4 at that time. I don't think so.
Damn, that's crazy, because then just a few years later, like you have the
whole league. The whole league.
I think Casey Hampton was rated like a 90s in Madden for some, and I just had no idea as a kid like why a nose tackle that couldn't pass rush was rated in the 90s.
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting to think of too, because like people's I will say this, like people's understanding of defensive scheme and defensive structure has come a long way, because it took a long time for people to catch up to the fact that the 3-4 defense was actually a better defense against the run, because back at like I would say like pre 80s Giants. Okay, so it's interesting because once Jimmy Johnson won the Super Bowl with Dallas in the 90s is kind of when everybody went to the 4-3, and then Tampa blew up. Well, Tampa didn't blow up, like Minnesota blew up when Dungy was there, and he took it to Tampa. And then, so the 4-3 just kind of blossomed throughout the NFL throughout the 90s and the 2000s. But before that, it was a 3-4 league, but it was a much, much different 3-4. It was way lighter up front with the front three. The outside backers were like, they would be like what you would consider. Okay, so like under actually, you know what? It's actually very, very similar to like what LSU used to do when like Les Miles was there with okay, so it's kind of the reason why Danielle Hunter got kind of knocked, and why the two defensive ends before that, Kiki Mingo, he was drafted high, but the other one sucked. But why their defensive ends in general were kind of a hard evaluation because they weren't really true edge rushers. They were force setters against the outside run, but any back out to their side, they were like man coverage back out as an edge defender. And that's kind of how like 3-4 backers used to be back in the day, like before Lawrence Taylor turned it into a weak side defensive end, basically. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So the old 3-4, like I said, if you go watch like old 70s, 80, not really 70s because you had Pittsburgh, but and Tom Landry 4-3, but like basically the 80s was like the era of the 3-4. Late 70s through the 80s, everyone ran a 3-4. Dude, everybody. And it's like I said, it's not like there were a ton of good edge rushing outside linebackers like that because the position wasn't really used that way. Backs weren't really used in the passing game because it was just have your backs block the outside backers and we'll go big on big with the linemen. So that's why offensive tackles used to not be super highly paid back in the day too, is because they were going against a bunch of 3-4 defenses with like undersized 5 techs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The threat, like the pass rushing threat wasn't that great. Like, I don't know. And so it was the consensus thought was that, okay, so the body types between 3-4 and 4-3 weren't that different back then. So all the 3-4 did was just kind of invite more bubbles. You know what I mean? And it was just you were lighter on that front line of defense, and your backers had to fill and scrape. So the 4-3, like I said, was even you still kind of saw that influence going into the 90s of like the heavier 4-3, the more run stopping 4-3, with the big defensive tackles that just get no push at all, and you don't have edge rushers. And I mean, it was just a different time. Teams didn't throw as much either. So, go ahead.
Well, the rules too. I mean, like,
oh yeah,
the rules favored running until 04 or whatever. So
basically. Yeah, basically until 2004. So, I mean, it's just kind of interesting, just seeing how, I don't know, like, it's just been, I think the public knowledge is much, much greater in terms of scheme and what the schemes are trying to do, and how the personnel fit into the schemes than I think there ever has been.
I mean, even now compared to like a couple of years ago on Twitter, I mean, the conversations always suck, but at least they're a little more. Before we were arguing like what a 3-4 rusher was, and now everything's just an edge, you know, or tackle techniques or whatever. It's cool to see, but
well, what you have to do, and we've kind of touched on this about a couple of times, is that you have to not look at positions on offense or defense in terms of the actual position. Okay, so it's very once again, it's very, very similar to basketball. It's not the actual position. And I think Matt Waldman has been talking about this a little bit lately too. It's the archetype of the position. It's what are you asking the player in this space to do? It's why whether you're looking at it if you're looking at it at an NFL bent, Cooper Kupp on the game day roster is listed as a wide receiver. Philosophically, he's a tight end. If you look at it in an H-back, if you look at it in like the structure of what they're trying to do historically, he's a wing TZ, you know, he's a wing back. And the same thing kind of goes for defense. I mean, we were just talking about with Honey Badger. What personnel packages really don't matter. The dude you can call him a nickel corner, you can call him a Sam linebacker, you can call him an extended overhang. It's all kind of the position archetype. A slot receiver and an outside wide receiver are not the same thing. Well, even with the slot receiver, like a big slot receiver and a small shifty slot receiver, you're not really going to ask them to do the same things ever. Like there's guys that can play slot that are like vertical stem slot wide receivers. They're basically like tight ends that can run up they're tight ends that can run up the seam that you don't ever want to put in line. You know what I mean? And that's different from fucking Wes Welker.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, these positions are all kind of called the same name, but what you ask them to do and how you look at them are, I mean, they can intrinsically be very, very, very different things. Like in basketball, a guard is a guard is a guard, but like a point guard is not a shooting guard. And even in that sense of the word, what do you do with a shooting guard who handles the ball all the time? Like, I mean, going back to the triangle offense, like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant were the fucking point guards in those offense if you look at it in a traditional sense. You know, they handled the ball, and they were the distributors. And even though the structure of that offense is kind of weird in terms of you're running everything through the post, and it's a heavy isolation-based offense, and there's a lot of off-ball movement. Like I said, basketball is not my technical forte. Like, you could kind of do all that stuff. Like, you could put you could run Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was a shooting guard on the Bulls roster. Okay, he was listed as a shooting guard. He was also the primary ball handler. So their point guard was really like a guy who played defense. And, I mean, depending on who it was, Ron Harper was more like just a straight up defense guy. B.J. Armstrong could like up the tempo and, you know, hit some threes. Steve Kerr was basically just there to shoot threes. So a point guard in the traditional sense of the word is handling the ball. He's like the quarterback of the offense in basketball. They didn't even use it like that. So really, like for the Bulls in that time, the point guard was actually the shooting guard. The shooting guard was actually the point guard. But if they wanted to, they could have Jordan do all of the power forward stuff and run the stuff from the high post, and then kind of turn Scottie Pippen into the point guard if they wanted to. So this stuff you have to look at what the player is being asked to do. And because the other thing that I always say, it's very, very rare that you watch something in sports, like a play or a philosophy or whatever, and it's like truly happening for the first time. You know what I mean? Like I say that about, I always, like I brought up the Rams so much just because their offense is kind of the one that I've seen the most out of anybody else.
Me too.
Year.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in LA, and I covered them last year for Football Guys, so I've seen them the most. Like, they're called innovative and everything, and they are, but what they're doing is rooted in really, really old, basic stuff that you can run well in high school.
Well, you even talk about, so like, you know, these colleges are running, you know, the tight front, right? So it's a 4-eye, 0-4-eye versus, you know, spread teams. And the goal is to clog up, you know, the middle gaps and free up, you know, your backers out of conflict or whatever. Well, I mean, that's directly derived from the Bear defense.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was going to say. If it's 4-eye, 4-eye, like it's just a spread out Bear front.
No, yeah, you
that's
just
all it
bring
is.
and you just bring in a couple guys versus two back, and there you have, you know, your answer to two back and spread. So everything is derived from something that's already been there. It's just like where the defenders are. The assignments don't change. Well, I mean,
if you look at it theoretically, like what that defense does, it's kind of not too different from what Belichick did in the Super Bowl, or like what you said. Okay, so against the Bear front, in a Bear front against two back, all you're doing is you're taking those two overhang players for spread and just moving them up to the line of scrimmage as edge guys, basically, as they're going to be force or they're going to be hook to curl.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm assuming that's how that tight front works, correct?
No, absolutely. The overhangs are just apexed off the offensive tackle and number two.
I mean, just kind of looking to where it's going forward in the future, that it kind of seems like that's going to be the general philosophy. Because here's the dirty secret, is that unless the quarterback is a runner, which doesn't really happen in the NFL, it's very, very difficult to run any gap stuff from gun.
Well, it's all inside
very
zone, outside zone.
unless the quarterback is a runner, and then you can do all kinds of cool shit if your quarterback is a runner. All quarterback counter, quarterback power, the what is it? I forgot what it's called when you do the option, but where the back is running the sweep and the quarterback is the one that hits it up inside, which is basically just a sweep trap from wing T. It's the same thing, you know what I mean?
They call it bash. It's like back away, bash.
Yeah. So you can do all kinds of cool gap stuff from gun if your quarterback is a runner. If he's not, though, you're stuck running zone, buddy. Like, that's what you're running. You don't have a whole lot of choice. That's the only way that you're going to get a productive, cohesive ground game. If you're in any type of any type of one back offense, or especially if you're in gun. And so really the answer to that is build a wall along the line of scrimmage, keep your mic clean, don't let the double hold up the double teams, don't let them get to the line of scrimmage, and your overhang guys are going to be able to still play force contain, and your mic is going to run free and just tear that shit up.
Well, I mean, Justice talks about this too, but like the guard box is really the only thing that matters.
Yes.
How many people you have from guard to guard, and if you have 4 versus their 3, then you're good. They're not going to bust runs. Like, you want them to run towards the sideline.
Oh, absolutely. Go for
it.
Because like I said, the mic is going to run clean, and that wide receiver or whoever is probably not going to block that force player. Probably not going to have, and you have whatever. I don't know how like the structure of the safety support is, but you're going to have safety support as well. So it looks like you said, it looks like a light box, but it's actually seems pretty structurally fucking sound. And like I said, I keep going back to what Belichick did in the Super Bowl, because it's an old defense, and all they did was substitute a defensive back in, and the shit worked against the modern offense. Exactly how you would draw it up.
Yeah, man, that's why he's the best.
He is.
Well, and you're a Brady fan too, right?
I'm a Brady truther.
All right, yeah.
I am a Brady truther.
Well, we're at like an hour.
And I'm not even a Pats fan, but
I won't.
Here's the reason why.
All right, go.
Here's the reason why. Bill Belichick in New England with Drew Bledsoe was 5-13 and on his way to getting fired. 5-13, worse than like what he was doing in Cleveland. 5-13. Tom Brady comes in and it's a wrap, folks. Then, because this is one of the ones that bugs the shit out of me, is everybody wants to use like the Matt Castle year as like a slight against Brady because they were moderately successful. I mean, I know 11-5 seems successful on paper, but here's the argument. Like everybody always wants to say like, oh my God, look at what happened to the Colts that year where Peyton Manning missed, and they went from an okay 10-6 team, really a 10-7 team because they lost in the first round of the playoffs, to what was it? What did they go? 1 whatever? Did they win one game or 2?
I thought they were like 2-14.
2-14. Okay, so 2-14. So that's an 8-win drop off. Everybody wants to look at the losses, but it's an 8-win drop off. New England with Matt Castle went 11-5. The year before that, what did they go?
What was that, 18-1?
Yes. That's a 7-game drop off, a 7-win drop off. I don't like people that don't count playoffs in terms of stats and in terms of wins and losses, because that shit matters.
No, yeah. I mean, it's the only thing that matters.
It's the only, yes. Oh, this shit that happens in October doesn't matter. It is the only stuff that matters. Okay, so you're telling me like even though they went 11-5, going 16-0 in the regular season and 18-1 overall, going to 11-5 after that is a significant drop off, and it was the same roster. It was all the same guys back, all the same dudes. 7-game drop off. So I mean, what? Yes, they had a functional football team that year, but like we're forgetting that the year before that they were the best team ever that didn't win a Super Bowl.
I mean, Eli will always have those rings, so
He will, and he's gonna go to the Hall. Well, I used to say that Eli's one of those rare guys where it's like the longer he plays, the more he actually tarnishes his own reputation, and you forget about like. Dude,
yeah,
those 2 rings matter, man. And he was legit good for the second Super Bowl. Like that entire season and postseason, he was legit good during that stretch. That was like a good peak.
We don't talk about Warner dying in New York and then coming back and almost winning a Super Bowl enough. Like that dude's crazy.
That is crazy, man.
Like he was done.
Dude, he was. Well, not even that, dude. He was bad at the end of St. Louis too. Like Bulger was legitimately outplaying him. He was like when it goes bad with Kurt Warner and like he gets like he fucked his finger, like he broke his thumb or something, and he was throwing like a ton of picks. I remember, and it looked bad. Like he had a 2, 3, 4 year stretch there where it was not pretty at all. So, yeah, his turnaround is really interesting. That's something I'll ask you about, actually. I know kind of Ken Wisenhunt doesn't get remembered fondly in terms of like NFL history, and rightfully so. But I do think that he had one of the most innovative ideas in the modern era of how you can actually rotate quarterback, especially not like 2 pocket quarterbacks, in a way that intuitively makes sense for your offense. And it was kind of born out of necessity, like how all things like that are. But it was actually really interesting because it was like, okay, we're going to run the base offense with Matt because we have to invest in him, and like the base offense between the 20 stuff and early in the game. But when we go, hurry up, 2-minute drill, red zone stuff, anything like that, we're putting Kurt in.
Damn, I don't even remember this. I mean, I don't pay attention to the Cardinals ever.
It was a long time ago, dude. We're talking like, what, 06, 07, 08?
Damn.
But yeah, he actually rotated his quarterbacks in a way that, like, if you wanted to do that, and especially if you have like a young guy that you don't really trust and a vet who has command of the offense, there's worse ways that you can do it than like, okay, you have the base offense and you have the hurry up and tempo stuff.
That's interesting. I feel like you could do that stuff with like kind of like Lamar and maybe like Fitzpatrick or something nowadays.
You probably could. It's not a bad idea. You know what I mean? And then the other way, if you were to rotate quarterbacks, it's obviously if you're using him as a runner. And I mean, it's another one where not enough credit is due to him for that innovation, but like Harbaugh kind of created a new quarterback position when he was rotating Cap with Alex, where it was kind of the same thing where Alex was like had the base offense, and well, Alex had like the tempo stuff and everything too, but in terms of red zone, not different at all from how the Saints use their little backup quarterback that they use for packages in the red zone. And this is the other big one, your 4-minute offense. When you have a lead and you need to get 2 first downs and run the clock out. Why do you if you're like a finesse 1-back team and that's kind of your philosophy and your structure, like you're kind of fucked in 4-minute offense.
Unless you could go 11 on 11.
Unless you can go 11 on 11. And that was really the interesting way that he used Cap, is he used him like a closer in baseball. So, yeah, it's just interesting. rotating quarterbacks is obviously not the ideal situation. Obviously, you want a guy to get 100% of the snaps and be good enough and where you feel comfortable enough for that. But I mean, if you're gonna rotate your guys, it can't just be like this. We're gonna rotate series or kind of doing it by feel. You kind of craft intuitive like roles that intuitively make sense for their skill set and cut them out of the shit that they don't do well. You know what I mean? It doesn't. Obviously, it's a hard thing to do, especially with that position. But there's just interesting ways of doing it if you want to go that route.
Yeah, and I think like Gundy did that at Oklahoma State actually. Like I think in 15 or 16. Yeah, I think it's more applicable to like the lower levels when quarterback play isn't as dependent.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
All right, man. So we're on like an hour 30. So I appreciate you I appreciate you coming on and talking some ball with me. Good first episode.
Good first episode. You kind of let me just ramble on, so I'm gonna pick your thoughts some more. We'll move to the next one.
No,
I do that though. I end up dominating podcasts like that. I'm a fucking motor mouth. I can't shut up.
Well, you're no longer shit post on the internet, so I get it. You got to get your thoughts out somewhere, man.
It is true. All right, so good episode until we do the next one. God knows when. Can't make any promises because we are two really undependable people when it comes to stuff like that.
I appreciate that, though.